Have you ever felt God speak to you without a single word? Have you ever encountered a moment when, instead of hearing something clear, the silence seemed to convey an even more powerful message? What if I told you there's a silence that carries such depth that it can change your life, even without uttering a single word? This is the power of Mary's silence. Today, you will discover the profound mystery of Medjugorje's unrevealed messages. And believe me, what you'll learn could transform your understanding of spirituality. Have you ever imagined what Mary has to say to us, but without using words? It seems hard to believe, but that's exactly what we'll explore. How Mary's silence, it is actually a divine language, full of teachings that touch us in indescribable ways. You may be wondering, how can silence be so meaningful? What happens when heaven decides to speak to us, not with audible words, but with signs, gestures, and the stillness of a gaze? The answer lies in the messages of Medjugorje, which were not spoken, but felt, experienced, and subtly revealed. For a long time, these messages remained hidden, waiting for the right moment to reach the most prepared hearts. And that's exactly what we'll discover today. What do these messages, conveyed through silence, have to teach us? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you. Prepare to understand the true meaning of divine silence and how it has the power to transform lives, as it did for so many people in The mystery lies in every detail, and with each new teaching, your understanding of what it means to hear without listening, to see without looking, will deepen. Are we truly prepared to hear Mary's messages without her having to speak a word? Now, let's begin the journey and understand the impact of a silence that is not empty, but filled with meaning and divine power. And what follows will connect you more fully with the revelations that await you. Silence is a strange thing, isn't it? We often seek answers in words, in the noise of the world, in discussions and explanations. But what if I told you there is a divine language that doesn't depend on words? A profound power that communicates not through sounds, but through silence, absence, and emptiness that, paradoxically, is full of meaning. Silence has a rare and powerful power. It goes beyond a simple pause. It carries within it the possibility of transformation, of revelations, of a communication that can only be understood when we are willing to listen with the eyes of the soul. It's fascinating to think that Mary, in her apparitions, often chooses silence as her primary means of communicating with us. Not that she lacks words, but silence is her preferred language. And this, in itself, is already a divine revelation. When we encounter Mary's silence, we are challenged to step outside our comfort zone, to abandon the hustle and bustle of the modern world, and allow ourselves to hear something much deeper, something that goes beyond what we can comprehend with our minds, something that can only be felt in our hearts. Imagine for a moment that you are standing before Mary, and she doesn't say a single word. What would you feel? Perhaps an incomparable peace, as if the universe were in perfect harmony with your being. Mary's silence has this effect on the souls most willing to listen. It invites us to connect with our deepest inner selves, to perceive the voices that remain in the background, which we often ignore. Ultimately, it is as if silence were the means by which God communicates most intimately with us, without the distractions of the world. And it's not just about what Mary's silence conveys, but also about what it allows us to feel. It touches us where words cannot reach, in the purest part of our being. When silence becomes a message, it reveals the power of faith and transformation that can only be understood through total surrender to the divine. Have you ever had that moment when silence seemed to say more than any words? That instant when, despite the absence of sound, you felt something greater was happening within you. This is the power of divine silence. It calls us to listen with our hearts, to open ourselves to transformation without the need for words. Mary, with her silence, guides us silently, but powerfully. It's not an empty silence, as we often interpret it. It's not a lack of communication, but rather a higher form of communication. In this silence, she shows us the path to true peace, true conversion. And, at the same time, it challenges us. It challenges us to look within, to confront the parts of ourselves we don't want to see, to deal with our deepest feelings, with pain, fear, doubt, and to allow all of this to be transformed by the divine presence. But what exactly does Mary convey to us through this silence? Why does she choose to speak without words? The answer may be simpler than we imagine. Silence, in this context, is not an absence of voice, but a profound way of drawing closer to God. It reminds us that often, the greatest act of faith is to trust in what we cannot see and hear. By remaining silent, Mary teaches us to trust in the divine mystery, to understand that there is something greater than words, something that is beyond our immediate comprehension. Mary's silence is, then, an invitation to total trust in God, a trust that goes beyond human understanding. But, of course, more is needed than simply contemplating silence. Mary calls us, through this silence, to interaction. She challenges us to live in tune with the divine message, which often does not come clearly or audibly, but rather in a silent way, which can only be understood by those with an open heart. Silence invites us to action. but the action of internal transformation, the one that demands renunciation, the one that calls us to overcome our own limits and reconnect with the divine in a deeper and more sincere way. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Let's continue exploring the importance of this divine silence and how it can lead us to a clearer understanding of Mary's messages, those that are unspoken but that make themselves felt in a unique and transformative way. When we talk about Medjugorje, we're not just talking about a small village in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We're talking about a place where heaven touched earth in such a real, palpable way that it transformed the lives of millions of people around the world. It's as if the world had received a call, a reminder, and through Mary's apparitions, this heavenly touch reverberates to this day, bringing with it messages of faith, hope, and conversion. But to understand Medjugorje's impact, we need to go back to the beginning, to that moment that changed everything. It all began in 1981. When 6 young women from Medjugorje began having visions of Mary. They weren't expecting it, they weren't looking for something extraordinary, but suddenly, something that seemed impossible happened. They began to see the Virgin Mary, who appeared to them as a woman full of light, on a hill called Podbrodo. Mary didn't come with great fanfare, nor with a booming voice, but with a gentle, serene presence. Charged with power, she revealed herself as the Queen of Peace, and the message she brought was directly linked to the restoration of peace in the world, and in the lives of each person. But the most striking thing of all was that Mary didn't come just to give advice, not just to offer comforting words. She brought something more, something profound. She began to continually reveal the 7 messages that would later become a point of reflection and meditation for millions of people around the world. Messages that, despite their power, were not being officially revealed to the public in the conventional way, as one would often expect. The silence surrounding these messages was, in fact, a message in itself. A call to look within, to seek truth and faith, personally and directly. But what happened in Medjugorje was more than just a series of apparitions. This small village became a spiritual center of pilgrimage. And even today, more than 40 years later, the apparitions continue, even though the Catholic Church has yet to issue an official statement on their authenticity. This, in itself, is one of the most fascinating things about Medjugorje, the mystery surrounding the apparitions and how they continue to touch hearts and transform lives in mysterious ways. Mary, through her apparitions, has spoken about prayer, fasting, peace, conversion, and the urgent need for inner change. The message she brought was not just for that moment, but for all time. It is an eternal message, one that resonates throughout our spiritual journey. However, something intriguing has happened over the years. While Mary made extraordinary revelations, to the visionaries, there are certain messages she chose not to reveal immediately. These unspoken messages, not spoken aloud but felt and understood silently, carry an even greater power. A power capable of penetrating souls, subtly, unhurriedly, in a way that demands that we be willing to hear them with the eyes of the Spirit. These unrevealed messages, even today, have the power to lead us to a deeper understanding of our own spirituality. They challenge us to be more than just spectators, but active participants in our own transformation. They show us that true faith depends, not on words, but on actions, choices, and daily decisions that connect us with the divine. Medjugorje is undoubtedly a phenomenon that goes beyond the story of a single village. It is a milestone in the spiritual journey of many people, a story of living faith that continues to inspire those seeking something greater, something that transcends the limits of human understanding. And as these unrevealed messages continue to resonate, they invite us to delve deeper, to seek the hidden truths, those that Mary, in her silence, wants us to discover for ourselves. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this mystery. What do these unrevealed messages mean for us today? How can we, in our daily lives, access this divine wisdom that is silently transmitted to us? Let's find out together. Medjugorje is undoubtedly a place of profound spiritual transformation. And what makes this phenomenon even more fascinating are the 7 unrevealed messages. A divine mystery that continues to resonate in the hearts of many, despite remaining largely hidden. What makes these messages so powerful is not the fact that they are spoken, but the impact they have, even in their silence. What Mary revealed, but did not speak openly, still resonates in the world, touching the hearts of those willing to listen. With their souls, these messages continue to transform lives, even without the official approval of the Church. And that is what makes them so extraordinary. I imagine for a moment a divine message that hasn't been fully revealed, but that, for some reason, your heart feels it needs to be understood. These messages aren't just words, they're spiritual impulses, like seeds sown into open hearts. They challenge us to seek more, to not be content with the superficial, to dive into the depths of our own spirituality and be transformed from the inside out. The mystery of the 7 unrevealed messages lies in their very nature. They are messages given to us little by little, gradually, as if time itself were the guardian of truth, waiting for each person to be ready to receive what has been left unsaid. This mystery is an essential part of the Medjugorje journey. They were not revealed all at once, but rather as a silent dance between heaven and earth, touching those willing to truly listen, with their hearts down now. If we look at the impact of these messages, we can see something even more impressive. Even though they haven't been officially released in their entirety, they continue to change lives. People from all over the world, without knowing exactly what's being said, feel the power of these unspoken words. These messages that come in the form of feelings, visions, and profound spiritual experiences. They don't need to be spoken to, be felt. They live in the hearts of those who seek, those who are unafraid to enter unknown territory, where faith is more important than immediate understanding. What do these messages teach us, then? They show us that faith depends not only on what we can literally see or hear, but on what we can perceive with the eyes of the soul, on what resonates in the deepest part of our being. They call us to trust, even without having all the answers. They remind us that Mary's silence is not empty, but filled with a wisdom that can only be understood by those willing to surrender to the divine mystery, to the journey of the unknown. These unrevealed messages from Medjugorje have the power to transform not only our lives, but also the way we see the world around us. They invite us to look beyond the surface, to perceive the hidden truths that lie all around us, waiting to be discovered. They are like keys to a new understanding of life, faith, and spirituality. They challenge us to be more than mere observers of life. They call us to be protagonists of our own spiritual transformation, to take responsibility for our journey and our decisions. And it's interesting to note that while many of these messages remain unrevealed, their impact is undeniable. They continue to guide those who are open to listening, those who, even if they don't yet fully understand, feel the power of this silent and mysterious communication. The power of these messages lies in their ability to transform those who allow themselves to be touched by them. They don't need to be publicly revealed to fulfill their divine mission. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this mystery. What do these 7 messages truly mean for us today? How can we apply their impact to our daily lives, even without fully understanding what they say? What does this teach us about our own journey of faith and inner transformation? Let's continue exploring this divine enigma, because there is much more to be revealed. Mary's silence, the mystery surrounding her apparitions, has a depth that often escapes us. Our first impression is that, in her silence, Mary is simply absent, not telling us what we would like to hear, what would be easy for our minds to grasp. But in truth, she is saying much more than could be expressed with words. It is as if, by remaining silent, Mary invites us to look within ourselves and perceive what truly matters. Her unspoken words speak directly to the heart, touching something that goes beyond logical understanding. This silence is not empty. It is charged with a silent, immeasurable power. Rather than uttering words that would only confirm what we already know, Mary chooses a deeper path, where words are unnecessary. Silence speaks directly to the spirit, to the essence of who we are. It challenges us to trust, to listen not with our ears, but with our hearts. When Mary remains silent, she teaches us that true wisdom comes not merely from spoken words, but from what is implicit, from what is felt, from what does not need explaining. This silent form of communication reveals life's deepest truths, truths that go beyond what reason can grasp. Why does Mary choose this silence? What does she want to show us? I believe that Mary's silence is an invitation to self-knowledge, to an intimate encounter with God. When Mary is silent, she forces us to look within, to reflect on ourselves and our spiritual journey. There are no ready-made answers, no comforting phrases, only Mary's silent presence, like a beacon illuminating the path to inner transformation. This silence challenges us to grow in faith, to develop a deep trust in God and His plan for us. Even when we don't understand everything that's happening around us, the wisdom contained in this silence goes beyond human understanding. When we stand before Mary in silence, we are called to transcend the need for easy explanations, to abandon superficial expectations, and to surrender ourselves to the depths of spirituality. This silence is not just about not speaking, but about allowing ourselves to feel, hear, and understand what goes beyond words. And it is in this silence that we find true peace. It is not the peace of a trouble-free life, but the peace that comes from the heart, the kind that can only be achieved when we learn to trust, even without seeing or understanding. Mary's silence is also a way of preparing us for what is to come, for the deeper messages yet to be revealed. It teaches us that divine wisdom is not revealed in a rush, but gradually, as we are ready to receive it. When Mary chooses to remain silent, she tells us that spiritual knowledge comes with time, with patience, with the willingness to listen to the inner voice and follow the path of faith, even without having all the answers immediately. How is this reflected in the lives of the faithful? For those who seek to understand Mary's silence, the experience is transformative. This silence invites an inner conversion, a change of mindset, and a renewal of faith. Rather than waiting for ready-made words or immediate answers, the faithful are challenged to live in tune with the divine mystery, to trust that everything has a purpose, even if it isn't clear to us at the time. Mary's silence thus becomes a powerful tool for transformation, teaching us to live more deeply, not to rush into easy solutions, but to accept what is revealed in its own time. Silence also helps us strengthen our relationship with God. When we stand before Mary in silence, we are forced to reevaluate our own relationship with the divine. It's not just about receiving words, but about living according to what we already know, about trusting in divine promises, even without seeing the answers immediately. This process of deep trust has a lasting impact, for it is in silence that we often find the most powerful answers for our lives. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this silence. What does it truly teach us about our faith journey? How can we live more deeply and meaningfully as we learn to listen to what lies beyond words? What can we learn from Mary's silence about how to deal with our own difficulties and challenges? These are the questions that, as we reflect on Mary's silence, can lead us to a richer and more transformative understanding of our spiritual lives. The first Medjugorje messages, which began appearing in 1981, were not just simple words. They were like a burst of light in a world already immersed in so much darkness. The central message was clear, direct, and challenging, a call to conversion, prayer, and peace. What seemed like just another apparition of Mary soon became a global movement that touched the hearts of millions. It was as if Mary's words were arrows shot directly into the soul, penetrating the deepest layers of the being, stirring the innermost structures of all who were willing to listen. Mary's invitation to prayer from the beginning was not just about reciting words. It was an invitation to live a life of constant prayer, to transform our mindset and our way of relating to God. This call to prayer was, in fact, an invitation to a deep and personal relationship with the divine, to seek the sacred in everyday life, to transform every act, every thought, into a silent and continuous prayer. Prayer was no longer something reserved for specific moments, but should become the essence of life. At the same time, the call for peace was even more profound. Mary, in her apparitions, emphasized that peace was not merely the absence of external conflicts, but a state of mind. True peace came from the heart, and it was this inner peace that should be cultivated and spread to the world. She knew that, in a turbulent world, the greatest challenge was finding peace within ourselves. And, as a mother, she guided us, showing us how to cultivate this inner peace, even in the face of adversity. But the greatest challenge in the early Medjugorje messages lay in the invitation to conversion. Mary came not only to console us, but to show us a path of transformation, a path of profound change. Conversion, in her words, was not an isolated event, but an ongoing process of purification, repentance, and spiritual renewal. She called us to abandon our ego, to seek a simpler, more faithful life, more aligned with the teachings of Christ. It was not an easy call, but it was an urgent one, as if time were running out and each soul was too precious to ignore. These first messages from Medjugorje began to touch hearts in ways many couldn't initially understand. The overall response was overwhelming. Within a few years, Medjugorje became a place of pilgrimage for millions, all seeking the peace Mary offered, the prayer that renewed, and the conversion that transformed. For those who surrendered to the call, something profound happened. Conversion wasn't just an outward change, but a true inner revolution, altering not only actions but also the way people thought and saw the world. It was as if Mary's words, imbued with a silent authority, were capable of piercing the heart of modern man, who often found himself far from true spirituality. It's interesting to note that over the years, the messages of Medjugorje have not lost their relevance. They continue to touch the hearts of new generations, remaining alive, like a fire that never goes out. Conversion, prayer, and peace remain the pillars of these messages. And many people who come to Medjugorje, even today, report profound transformations in their lives, as if touched by something greater, something inexplicable. But what's most intriguing is how this call to conversion, prayer, and peace isn't limited to pilgrimages. Mary's messages weren't just for those traveling to Medjugorje, but for the entire world. She calls us to live these principles in our daily lives, to bring peace, prayer, and conversion into our homes, our workplaces, and our relationships. The impact of these messages, then, extends beyond physical space, reaching the most distant corners of the human heart. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this impact. How do these messages from Medjugorje connect with our daily lives? How can we apply the call to conversion, prayer, and peace in our daily lives, in such a troubled world? What does Mary, with her invitation, teach us about how to experience spiritual transformation amid modern challenges? Let's explore this together, because true conversion is not just a one-time decision, but an ongoing journey, and it is on this journey that we find the true meaning of living according to the messages of Medjugorje. Mary's silence is one of the most profound and powerful aspects of her messages. It is not an empty silence, as we often understand silence in the material world, but a silence charged with meaning. This silence is like an invitation, a call to introspection, and a direct encounter with God. Mary, with her silent presence, takes us to a place where words are no longer enough, where understanding comes not through reason but through a direct connection with the Spirit. When she is silent, she does not abandon us. On the contrary, she invites us to go deeper, to hear what cannot be said, to perceive what lies beyond words. This invitation to inner silence challenges us to live in a world where we are constantly surrounded by noise, voices, and distractions. Our minds, saturated with stimuli, distance us from our true essence. And it is in this context that Mary's silence becomes even more powerful. She calls us to stop, slow down, and listen. To listen, with our hearts, with our souls, to what we often overlook. Mary's silence is not an end, but a means, a bridge that connects us to the divine. It allows us, for a moment, to silence all the worries of the world and simply be in the presence of God. But what does this really mean for us? In practical terms, Mary's silence leads us, guides us within ourselves. It leads us on a journey of self-discovery, where we find the truth hidden within our hearts. This silence teaches us to be more conscious, to live more deeply and less superficially. It calls us to abandon the external and look within, to reflect on our choices, our feelings, and our actions. By removing ourselves from the noise of the world, we find the space necessary to hear God's voice, to understand the mysteries of faith, and to reconnect with the divine purpose in our lives. Mary, by remaining silent, offers us the greatest gift, the space for our own transformation. She challenges us not to seek easy answers, not to wait for immediate solutions, but to have the courage to enter into silence and seek the truth that lies within us. In our relationship with God, this is a path that requires patience and faith. It is not a path of quick answers or ready-made solutions, but of spiritual growth, learning, and renewal. When Mary leads us into this profound silence, she calls us to transform not only our actions but also our mindset. True transformation occurs not in external things, but within our being. By silencing our worries, our doubts, and our ego, we can make room for divine wisdom, for the guidance that comes from God and leads us to a fuller life, more aligned with the spiritual principles Mary teaches us. It's interesting to note that, even without words, Mary's silence has the power to speak directly to our souls. It forces us to confront our true nature, what we often don't want to see, the fears and weaknesses that prevent us from living fully. But at the same time, this silence offers us the opportunity to heal these wounds, purify our hearts, and open ourselves to God's unconditional love. This silence, mysterious as it may be, is a way of calling us to transformation. It helps us break with old mentalities, abandon the ways of thinking that limit us, and open ourselves to something greater. When we are willing to enter this silence, we become more receptive to change, more willing to hear what God has to say. To us, this is an invitation to true conversion, to change that begins from within and over time is reflected in our attitudes, our relationships, and our faith. Now, I want to delve even deeper into Mary's silence. What does it truly mean for our daily lives? How can we apply this invitation to introspection and transformation in such a hectic and noisy world? What happens when we truly allow ourselves to enter this silence and hear God's voice, free from external distractions? Let's explore these questions, because Mary's silence, though mysterious, has the power to transform us in ways no words could. The visionaries of Medjugorje, those chosen to witness Mary's apparitions, have a unique and profound experience that goes far beyond words. They not only saw Mary, but also experienced the intensity of divine silence, a silence charged with meanings that go beyond human comprehension. Over the years, many of these visionaries have shared their experiences, and their words have the power to touch the hearts of those who, like us, seek to understand what truly happens in the mystery of spiritual communication. One of the most powerful accounts comes from Ivanka Ivankovic, one of the first visionaries. She shares that, throughout the apparitions, Mary invited her to silence, not only in moments of prayer, but also in her daily interactions. For Ivanka, this silence was not simply an absence of sound, but an intense presence that guided her to reflect on her own life and spiritual journey. She speaks reverently of how Mary's often silent words penetrated deeply into her soul, revealing truths that could not be expressed with words. Mary's silence for Ivanka was not a lack of communication, but an even more powerful form of connection, something only those with an open heart could understand. Another visionary, Jakov Kolo, shares an experience that reveals how Mary's silence can become an instrument of transformation. During one of her apparitions, Jakov reports that, touched by Mary's profound silence, he felt an inexplicable peace enveloping him. He speaks of the impact of this silence on his life, as if it were an invisible force guiding and transforming him internally. He couldn't explain what he felt in words, but he knew that this silence was leading him to a greater understanding of his faith, his mission, and, above all, his relationship with God. For Jakov, Mary's silence was a constant invitation to inner reflection, an invitation to listen beyond the external voice, to the voice of the Spirit, which manifests itself silently but powerfully. These testimonies are not isolated. Other visionaries, such as Merjanair Dragicevic, have spoken of the transformative impact of Mary's silence on their lives. Merjanair reports that even when Mary did not speak directly, there was something in the atmosphere, a divine energy that was present. She describes it as a feeling of being enveloped by an immense and indescribable love, something that surpassed human understanding. Merjana believes that Mary's silence teaches us to perceive God's voice in a purer way, without the distractions of the world, and how he calls us to listen to what lies beyond words. It's fascinating to see how, for all these visionaries, Mary's silence is not empty. On the contrary, it carries an immense spiritual depth that goes beyond logical explanation. They believe that Mary's silence communicates something vital to us, something that goes beyond what words could express. They feel that, through this silence, Mary invites us to enter a deeper space within ourselves, a space where answers are not given immediately, but through a process of internal transformation that takes time, patience, and faith. Mary's silence, in their experience, is an invitation to silence the external world and hear the divine voice, the one that is often hidden in the little things. In the details of everyday life, these accounts not only show us how Mary's silence, it has a profound impact on the visionaries' lives, but also invite us to reflect on how we can experience this silence on our own spiritual journey. What happens when we allow ourselves to enter into silence? When we distance ourselves from the hustle and bustle of the world and seek to hear God's voice in our hearts. The experience of the Medjugorje visionaries teaches us that silence is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. For it is in this silence that we often find the deepest answers to our existential questions. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this aspect of Mary's silence. What can we learn from these testimonies about the impact of silence on our own lives? How can we apply this experience to our daily lives amidst the daily pressures and noise of the world? Mary's silence is a key to spiritual transformation. But how can we truly open this door and allow divine silence to lead us to inner peace and true connection with God? Let's explore this together, because I believe that by understanding the depth of this silence, we can begin to live more fully, more consciously, and more connected to the divine. Comment there. That makes sense to me. When we talk about how we hear Mary's unrevealed messages, it's important to understand that these messages aren't limited to spoken words. In fact, Mary, in her divine wisdom, communicates in a much more subtle and profound way than we can imagine. She doesn't limit herself to what is directly said, but uses signs, intuitions, and even mystical experiences to touch our souls in a unique way, on a level that goes beyond human language. Often, people who have an experience with Mary, like the visionaries of Medjugorje, report that the communication they receive is not merely verbal, but a sensation, a presence, a sudden understanding that arises from within them. When we approach this spiritual reality, what we need to do is not simply listen with our ears, but listen with our hearts. Mary's words do not come concretely like our everyday conversations. They come to us through a gentle touch, a sense of peace that fills the heart, or an intuition that guides us in our decisions. Mary also communicates through divine signs. This can be something as simple as a moment of deep reflection, where we suddenly experience a clarity we didn't know where it came from. It can also be a vision, a symbol, an event that, to the world, may seem trivial, but which, to us, carries a profound message from God. These communications can come in mysterious ways, like the sight of a flower, the sound of a heavenly song, or even something so personal and unique that it only makes sense to the person experiencing it. When Mary communicates, she does so in a personalized way, knowing exactly what each person needs to hear at their specific moment in life. Intuitions also play a crucial role in this silent communication for Mary. When we seek connection with the divine, we are often guided by sudden thoughts or sensations that seem not to come from our rational mind. They are like small whispers from the soul, arising when we allow ourselves to be in tune with divine will. These intuitions can be seen as silent messages from Mary, guiding us toward important decisions, helping us understand life's mysteries, or giving us the right direction when we are lost. Mystical experiences, in turn, are another powerful form of communication. Many people who have experienced these experiences speak of moments of profound spiritual connection, where time seems to stand still, and the presence of Mary and God is so palpable that nothing else matters. In these experiences, material reality dissolves, and the person finds themselves in a state of divine contemplation, where answers emerge wordlessly without the need for explanation. Experiencing these mystical moments is as if Mary were whispering directly into our spirit, leading us to an understanding that goes beyond the human mind. The mystery of these unrevealed messages, which arrive without words, is truly fascinating. Often, we wait for a clear answer, something we can hear or touch. However, Mary teaches us that true divine communication doesn't need words to be understood. Silence, intuitions, signs, and mystical experiences are, in fact, much more powerful ways to connect with the divine. This communication challenges us to trust, to accept the unknown, and to follow our intuition. without the need for a logical explanation for everything. But how, as believers, can we hear these messages, even without words? The key is to open our hearts to silence our agitated minds and to be willing to perceive the signs that are all around us. When we connect with divine silence, we begin to understand that there is much more happening around us than meets the eye or the ear. Divine communication, like Mary's, is a language from soul to soul, and it is only when we are willing to enter this space of faith and trust that we begin to truly hear what is being transmitted to us. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this mystery. How can we become more sensitive to this silent communication from Mary? What can we do to be more in tune with these signs and intuitions that guide us on our spiritual journey? Let's explore how we can, in our daily lives, open our hearts to these messages and learn to hear what is unspoken but deeply felt. Because true spiritual transformation doesn't happen with words alone. It happens in silence, trust, and surrender to the divine. Comment there. That makes sense to me. The unrevealed messages of Medjugorje remain a fascinating and profoundly relevant mystery, especially when considered in the context of the modern world in which we live. The fact that they still exert such an impact, even without being fully revealed, makes us reflect on their importance and how they continue to touch the lives of millions, more than 40 years after their first manifestations. In an increasingly chaotic world, where spirituality seems to be being replaced by other priorities, these messages remain an anchor, something that connects us to a deeper truth and a path of transformation. We live in an era of rapid change, with information being exchanged in fractions of a second and life becoming increasingly frenetic and superficial. What Mary, through Medjugorje, called us to do was exactly the opposite: to stop, reflect, and return to what truly matters. The unrevealed messages, which directly touch our spirituality and the call to conversion, continue to be a reminder that true transformation comes from within, from our personal relationship with God. These messages, which still await full revelation, challenge us to seek peace and transformation in times of great turmoil. The modern world is undoubtedly in crisis, not only politically and socially, but also spiritually. We live in a time where materialism, consumerism, and the relentless pursuit of immediate pleasure distance us from the true essence of life. Spirituality has, in many cases, been diluted, and people feel disconnected, lost, and directionless. In this scenario, the messages of Medjugorje, not yet fully revealed, appear as a beacon of light, a sign that salvation lies not in something external, but within ourselves, in our ability to connect with the divine and with our own spiritual essence. These messages offer a fundamental key to spirituality today. They are not just about religious practices or specific acts of faith, but about a profound inner transformation that leads us to live according to divine principles in all areas of our lives. People today are searching, more than ever, for answers that can give meaning to a world that seems to be falling apart. Mary's call, in Medjugorje, especially in the unrevealed messages, is an invitation to look within, to deep self, to a life of constant prayer, and to the search for true peace, not the superficial and fleeting kind, but the peace that comes from within, transcending time and external circumstances. At a time when the boundaries between good and evil often become blurred, and where spiritual crises seem to dominate the minds of many, the unrevealed messages of Medjugorje serve as a guide to redirect our spiritual journey. They remind us that, although the world may be in chaos, the answer lies not outside of us, but within our hearts, in our ability to hear and respond to the divine call. These unspoken messages challenge the modern world's concept of immediacy. They ask us for patience, reflection, and trust in the divine process, something that, however difficult, is exactly what many souls in crisis need to find peace and purpose. What these messages really tell us is that salvation lies not in changing the world around us, but in transforming our inner selves, our way of thinking, our way of seeing the world in the context of so much turmoil, fear, and uncertainty. Mary invites us to live more consciously, more connected to our faith, and more willing to follow the paths of spirituality, even when society pushes us away from it. The relevance of these messages lies not only in their content, but in the way they invite us to be more human, more humble, and more open to divine action. These unrevealed messages also serve as proof that true spirituality goes beyond human understanding. Even without being fully revealed, the truth they contain is being experienced by many who, by seeking Medjugorje or opening themselves to Mary's call, experience immense inner transformation. The relevance of these messages, therefore, lies not only in their direct communication, but also in their ability to act profoundly in the hearts of those who have faith and are open to change. They speak to each of us uniquely, according to our spiritual needs and inner conditions. Now, I want to delve even deeper into applying these messages to our daily lives. How can we integrate the lessons Mary brought us, even if they are still partially hidden? How can we live these messages of conversion, peace, and prayer in the midst of daily turmoil? where distractions are immense and difficulties seem insurmountable. This is where the true spiritual journey begins, and the unrevealed messages become a guide that leads us back to our true path. After all, spiritual transformation, as Mary always showed us, does not depend on easy answers or quick fixes, but on an ongoing commitment to our own evolution and to the divine plan God has for each of us. Come in there. I'm on this journey. 2. Mary's silence, though seemingly an absence of words, carries profound, transformative power. The human mind often tends to associate silence with a lack of communication or direction. But Mary's silence is actually a direct invitation to interaction. It is not empty, but full of meaning. And it is precisely in this emptiness that we find the strength for spiritual transformation. Over the centuries, souls who have sought Mary's presence, even without a clear word or an explicit message, have discovered that this divine silence has the ability to penetrate the essence of who we are, helping us live a deeper, more authentic spirituality, and one more connected to the divine. Mary's silence challenges us to slow down and reflect on our spiritual life. We live in a time where hustle and bustle seem to dominate our daily lives. External distractions, work pressures, daily responsibilities, and even the constant flow of information keep us from the tranquility necessary to hear God's voice. And this is precisely where Mary's silence comes in. It calls us to pause, to silence the world around us, and to open ourselves to what lies beyond the visible, to the profound message that can only be heard when we are truly present in the moment. This silence is a powerful tool in daily spiritual practice. Prayer, for example, is not just a list of requests or empty words. It is a moment of inner silence, where we allow ourselves to be completely immersed in the divine presence. The practice of prayer does not need to be filled with elaborate words. Often, the most powerful prayer is the one that requires no sound at all, because it comes from the heart, from the pure intention of connecting with the divine. Mary's silence teaches us that true prayer is that which arises from our desire to be with God, without the need to justify or constantly ask for something in return. Inner silence allows us to enter a state of deep meditation, where the divine presence becomes clear and accessible. Reflection, too, is a practice that finds its true meaning in silence. When we stop to reflect, not only on our actions, but on the direction of our lives, we open a space for deep introspection. Mary, in her silence, invites us to reflect on the purpose of our existence, on what we are doing with the time we have been given, and how we are living our faith. This space for reflection is essential for spiritual growth, because it is through it that we begin to understand our motivations, our weaknesses, and, above all, our capacity for transformation. Without stillness, without silence, reflection, it becomes superficial and hasty. Mary teaches us to reflect patiently, to look within, and to listen to what God has to say to us, even if it is in a silent voice. Mary's silence also calls us to seek the deeper meaning of life. In a world where everything seems ephemeral and fleeting, the search for true and lasting purpose often leads us down tortuous paths. Mary's silence, however, offers us the opportunity to discover this deeper meaning, one that goes beyond material achievements and external accomplishments. Mary invites us to seek true peace, true joy, which does not come from outside, but from our connection with God. And this search is not something that happens hurriedly or instantly, but rather a continuous process of surrender, trust, and faith. It is in silence that we find the answers to our life's deepest questions. It is in silence that we discover who we truly are and what we are called to be. This spiritual awakening that occurs through Mary's silence has a transformative impact. It allows us to see the world through different eyes, with more compassion, more attentive to the suffering of others, and, at the same time, more trusting in divine action. The spiritual transformation we experience by allowing ourselves to experience Mary's silence is not a superficial change, but a shift that affects our attitudes, our choices, and our worldview. When we open ourselves to divine silence, we begin to understand that true change begins within us, in our relationship with God and the world around us. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. How can we truly integrate Mary's silence into our daily lives? In such a noisy and hurried world, how can we use silence as a tool for spiritual transformation? The key is to understand that silence is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be embraced, for it is in it that we find the truth, peace, and wisdom we seek. Through silent prayer, deep reflection, and a constant search for the meaning of our existence, we can transform our spiritual journey and connect with the divine in a more authentic and true way. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Mary's silence, as we have seen throughout this time, is much more than a simple absence of words. It is a profound and mysterious language, a form of direct communication with our souls. When we encounter Mary's silence, we are not left adrift, without direction, but rather are called to a powerful introspection, which leads us to reflect on our faith, our choices, and our spiritual journey. Silence, far from being a barrier, is an invitation to action. It challenges us to silence external voices, to slow down, to seek a genuine encounter with the divine. What is Mary's silence telling us, then? It calls us to transformation, to the conversion of our minds and hearts. Each moment of silence in her presence invites us to a new beginning, to a deeper reflection on how we have lived and how we can align our actions with divine will. When Mary is silent, she gives us the opportunity to listen to ourselves more attentively, to look within and understand where we truly need to change. Perhaps it's in forgiveness, patience, humility, or a renewed commitment to our faith. Mary's silence is an opportunity for inner growth, to connect with life's true purpose, and to find the peace we often seek in the wrong things. Furthermore, Mary's silence teaches us to trust in a greater plan. In a world where everything seems to be explained and where haste is a constant, silence calls us to trust in the mystery, to believe that even without understanding everything, we are being guided by something much greater than ourselves. What Mary conveys to us in silence cannot be fully understood immediately. These are not ready-made answers or quick fixes, but a wisdom that reveals itself slowly, over time, as our own spiritual journey progresses. Throughout life, we experience moments of inner silence that can seem challenging. However, it is in these moments that we are called to seek something deeper, something that goes beyond the surface. Silence, both in our prayers and in our daily lives, is the gateway to this more intimate encounter with God. Mary's silence is a reminder that we don't need words to be touched by the divine. Sometimes, what is needed is a heart willing to hear what lies beyond words, to listen to the gentle murmur of God's presence, revealed in every breath, in every heartbeat. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt Mary speak to you silently? What was that experience like? What has her silence revealed in your life? Leave a comment below and share your experiences. Who knows, by opening yourself to this silence, you might discover something profound you hadn't noticed before. This is an invitation for you to continue this journey, to explore more deeply Mary's silence and how it can become a fundamental part of your own spiritual transformation. Because when we truly allow ourselves to listen to silence, we discover that it has much to teach us. Comment there. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this message truly resonated with you. I'm so grateful that you took the time to explore Mary's silence and how it can transform our spiritual journey. If this content resonated with you, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me," so I know you're with me through the rest of this journey. And if you found this reflection valuable, like the video to show you're connecting with what we're sharing here. And if you want to continue deepening your spirituality, there's a video right here that complements this topic. Click on it and join me on this journey. I'll stop here, but I hope to see you in the next video. Let's continue together, seeking ever more answers and transformations. See you soon.